Well, welcome everybody. Hey, um, sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I was having some technical difficulties. Welcome everybody to Job Search Live. This is the October 9th edition. So I am getting started now and talking about the topics that were in this week's Summary Sunday, which came out a little bit late. So I was traveling this weekend and didn't have access to my computer, so I couldn't publish it. But it's up now, and I've sent it out through my newsletter. And the topic of Summary Sunday is new and classic job search. So, job search tips. So I feature a handful of articles related to some job search tips that are classic. In other words, the common advice that we all need to hear or be reminded of, and then some newer job search tips. And so that was the focus of this week's Summary Sunday. Hi Jody, good to see you. Yep, that's where I was, Jody. And so these were the topics, and the first one is by my all-time favorite, one of my all-time favorite people. It is by Dr. Don Graham, and it was 11 simple ways to begin to build a relationship, not just a Rolodex when networking. And what I loved about this article, and I'm going to go through some of the points that Don makes, is that uh, networking really is, there are some subtleties to networking that a lot of times people forget about or don't know about, and so she points them out. The first one, and I think I've said this many times about networking, is that it invest in them. So before you jump on a call, before you do anything, you have to spend time researching the person, which means going to their LinkedIn profile and other social media outlets if they have them, to learn about their career path, to learn about what's going on in their life. And and so you can use that information first and foremost to start the conversation off by showing an interest in the person that you are meeting with. That's what it's all about. You're going to learn something. The whole idea of this conversation is to learn something from them. Um, and really good leaders are always looking for the opportunity to learn from others. So your ability to network and show an interest in other people is another way for you to build your leadership competencies. Whenever possible, Don says to get an introduction because it's so much easier to reach out and ask somebody to meet with them if you've been introduced by somebody you both know. Have an agenda. So Dawn has done a video on the LinkedIn Learning on how to set an agenda, which she links to. But it's not hard. You are driving the conversation for about 15 to 30 minutes, depending on what you've arranged or what the person has agreed to. I wouldn't ask for more than 15 or 30 minutes. That's a big ask. But you know what you're going to be covering and what questions you're going to ask and how the conversation is going to generally flow. Here's the other thing, follow their advice. And so sometimes the whole point of talking with this person is to ask them for their advice, insight, and information and recommendations. You want to be listening. And because when you thank the person, when you follow up, you're going to reference some of the tips, advice, recommendations that they gave you and how you're going to take action on them. That shows that you're somebody who's very sincere in wanting to learn and take action and that you respect the person's time. Um, have an ask, and so it's if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. So you're not asking for a job, but if you can ask for an introduction to somebody, or person mentions some companies that may be of interest to you in your job search, ask them if they know anybody in those companies that they could introduce you to. The other thing that Dawn recommends is keeping track of all these conversations because sometimes once you've been doing this for a while, it's easy to lose sight of it's easy to lose track of who introduced you to who and how that conversation went and how that stream of conversations goes. Because the idea is each time you talk to somebody, you're getting introduced to new people. So it's nice to be able to track that back, reference the other people along the way that have given you names, and be able to remember who those people are. Send a thank you, she says. And she does also recommend teeing up another meeting. She says, for example, send in your thank you message, send something like, I'd love to reconnect with you after I've officially finished my program in a few months, or your recommendations have been very helpful and I'd love to keep you updated on my progress in this area. Um, so there are more things about making this a habit. This isn't this habit of networking isn't something that you just do during a job search. It is something that you do forevermore. It is how very sophisticated professionals manage their career. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And in the olden days, like in the 80s, that's why golfing was such a big thing. That's where people networked. It is why conferences are so important. It's the who's who in your industry. So you want to make sure that you are networking forevermore, not just something you do when you need a quick fix or you think a quick fix for your job search. Um, and at the very end of the conversation, if it isn't evident, then ask the question, is there anything that I can do for you? You've been so helpful in sharing your information and gracious with your time. I'd love to return the favor. What can I do for you? Just that simple statement can go a long way to show that you're genuinely and sincerely appreciative. Um, Don also reminds us that not you're not going to click with everybody. There are going to be people that you meet with, or people that don't respond, or to your email to meet with them, or there are going to be people who you don't click with when you meet with them, and that's fine. That's just human nature. So don't try and force a relationship that wasn't meant to be. Even if it's something that is really important to you, you'll have to find other ways around it. So that was Dawn's awesome article, 11 Simple Ways to Build a Relationship, Not Just a Rolodex. And I hope that you all have had a chance to see that. I think that um, the next article was by Jenny Foss. It's called New LinkedIn Features That Scream Help You Land a Job. And so the cool thing about Jenny, and I've loved Jenny for a long time, so shout out to my friend Jenny. Jenny has done a couple of LinkedIn training videos or training videos for LinkedIn on LinkedIn. And so I want you to check those out. But she also overviews some of the new features that LinkedIn is offering, like the featured feature, which is that banner above your experience section that talks about that you can select different posts, whether it's a post that you made, an article that you shared, um, a document, something, video. You can share those as a featured, and it's prominently displayed. The other thing that she talks about is that the Get Hired button, so making that public or private. And I think the jury's still out on that. I in order for your network, and this is the question that I still have to research and figure out, but in order for you to turn that open to new opportunities or open to opportunities on so that everybody can see it, if you're actively job seeking and you're not in an undercover job search, then I think it automatically gives you the green banner, which isn't my favorite thing. But then again, if that's what you have to do to make sure everybody sees that you're open to opportunities, I guess that's what you've got to do. What I still don't ever really advise is including in your headline the fact that you're open to new opportunities. Your headline should be on LinkedIn should really be only about the qualifications, and it should be about selling your skills and abilities, not that you're open to new opportunities. The other green banner, the profile banner, and other information, you know, I I don't love it, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? So Jenny Foss walks through all those new features on LinkedIn. And then this isn't necessarily a new article. I think I've seen it before, but I loved it and I love it again. Penetrating the Hidden Job Market by Jeff Lipschultz on jobhunt.org. The reason this is so good is that it helps you understand some of the many reasons why companies do not publicly share their job opportunities. It would be great if they always did, but we know they don't always. So Jeff walks through, I don't know, four-ish reasons or maybe five reasons why the jobs don't get posted. Like sometimes this is due to the required confidentiality of the job search. Other times they need to fill the job, but it hasn't been defined or the approved yet, but they want to get it out there. Um, Sometimes companies just don't want to receive that thousands of resumes from unqualified job seekers, so they don't post it. They instead rely on employee referrals. And employee referrals are a really key part of a company's recruiting strategy. It's much more cost effective for them, and it's something that companies have been relying on for quite a while. So that was the second article in this week's Summary Sunday, penetrating um, the hidden job market. And then my friend Mark Anthony Dyson, eight small needle movers for your job search. And so Mark walks through, and these are just little, they're not major things, but little things that you can do to switch up your job search and perhaps see some more activity. Like personally connect with active recruiters, human resource professionals, and employers who continuously post jobs and offer sound advice. Just little things like that. So if you haven't read his article, there's some nuggets in there. I bet you there is at least one thing on his list that you could do today to move that needle on your job search, as he says. The next one is an article about some of the new Zoom features for meetings, phone, and webinar. And so some of these are fun to see in a classroom. They're sort of classroom enhancements and things like that. I want you to scroll to the very bottom of the Zoom blog that talks about their new features, because one of the new things that they're offering is the ability for anybody to create video training and charge a fee for people, or charge no fee, but to create training online, and Zoom would host it. So it becomes sort of like any one of those training platforms that you may have been maybe familiar with, Skillshare or even LinkedIn Learning. These are video training sessions that you can either post for free to build credibility in the area of expertise that you have, or you could give training and charge for it. So there's an opportunity to build brand awareness of you as well as make money. And that's some of the new features coming to Zoom. Then Dory Clark and Tomas, I can't remember his last name, talk about four ways to recapture what's lost when you're not in an office. That's true for people who are working remotely, but it's also true for job seekers. And this world in which we are working from home and remotely is I feel is very isolating, but we're all in it together. So I hope that you look at some of Dory Clark's tips and find ways to think about how you can make your virtual job search more like the office. Um, okay, so I have, and those were the articles. Oh, and then I was so honored. My friend Mark Miller, Career Pivot, interviewed me in a podcast that he did for 55 plus job search, and what's different and what we want older job seekers to know about job search today. So we have a conversation. When he was in Austin, Texas, we set up an interview, and we talked about some of the things that he's seeing down there in Austin, and I was talking about some of the things we're seeing up here as far as the older job seeker, and what they can do to look more hireable. And so that was a great conversation. If you're an older job seeker and you haven't been exposed yet to Career Pivot by Mark Miller, I highly recommend that you check it out. He's got a lot of great articles, and he's got a lot of great podcasts that I have been able to participate in, a couple of them by now. And Mark's whole focus is on the older job seeker, so it's a great way to sort of up your knowledge if you're an older job seeker. Um, there were a couple more issues that I wanted to talk about. So, One is it came as sort of a recommendation or comment from somebody in my career Sherpa tribe here who said, "Oh my gosh, Hannah, I didn't realize that in some parts of the country, employers are not allowed to ask for your salary." Your past salary information, and that is true. New York State is one of those states, but there's several other states and cities that have banned that question from their application process and from the interviewer, from the interviewing process. It doesn't mean that companies may not still try to ask you that question, and it is up to you as to whether or not you want to answer that question. Um, but I would always be very aware and of, especially depending on state, where you live and whether or not that question is quote unquote legal or not. In New York State, if you find that a recruiter during a phone conversation is asking you for your past salary information, I'm not saying that you tell the recruiter, you shouldn't be asking me that question. What I'm suggesting is that you do an even better job trying to find out what their salary is and then express the, ex, let them know whether or not that's within your range or you're interested in continuing the conversation. Um, so asking about your past salary history is not the same as asking about what your salary expectations are. Companies can still ask that. That's not an off limits question. So again, on an application, oftentimes you have to fill that number in, um, and it won't let you pass the application without filling in that number. So you're really going to want to do your due diligence and research to understand what the going rate is, and what range is the going range for the kind of work that you're interested in your particular part of the world, and at your particular level. Ask people who hold a similar position, ask recruiters what they're seeing that range is before you're putting a number in there. To only use your own frame of reference or own salary as a point of reference is not the best idea. You really want to talk to others outside of your own world so that you have a more accurate sense of what that going rate is. So when asked on an application what your salary expectations are, you're going to put what the suitable range is. Whatever number you put for a low number better be a number that you can accept. Certainly there's wiggle room there. Um, and the number at the high end is whatever it is. I've also known people that have been able to type in willing to discuss or negotiable, let's discuss. So that's an option too. So that's the salary question. Has anyone had any experience with evading, getting around the salary question? Is that something that people are commonly facing? If so, let me know. Here's the other thing I'm going to do with you. Okay. Was that annoying? How do you all feel? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. How do you feel about watching somebody on video take a swig of water? Or in my case, it's Diet Coke. How does that how does that come across on video? Let me keep going. Um, One of the things that I gave some tips, 17 video job interview tips, and one of the things that I saw in a comment or made reference to in a comment when it was posted on LinkedIn was somebody drinking water during an interview, and I was thinking to myself, can't you go an hour without sipping on water? I mean, it's just annoying to see this, right? Thank you, Matt. Who wants to look at somebody slurping on something to drink? So, like in my mind, it's a no-brainer. Don't drink during a video interview. It's only 30 minutes, maximum an hour. Who can't go an hour without drinking something? That's my stance, right? But then there are all these other people that are saying how cruel and unusual it is for someone to be judged based on their taking a sip of water during an interview. Drinking water makes people feel less nervous. And if you went to an in-person interview, you would have been offered coffee or water to begin with. So what's the difference? Like the difference is it's just me and the camera, right? And when I do this, It's interrupting the conversation. It is getting in the way of what little there is to read about me. So in my world, and from my perspective, I'm saying no, don't drink water during an interview. But a lot of these recruiters are saying I'm okay with it as long as the person has the good skills and talents and it makes them feel more comfortable, go for it. I just think it's a very different world that we live in, and I'm just looking for some additional insight. What do you all think about drinking water during an interview? Ooh, Suzanne, I'm sort of jumping back, right, to Suzanne's comment. Um, Suzanne is saying she'd say something like, I hope the salary is commensurate with the going market rates and the position and skills that I bring to the table. Which is what you've said, Suzanne, is a great way to sort of position that. I would soften it a little, and and make it seem more like a question than a statement. Um, um, so something like, based on my skills and understanding of the position so far, I'm sure that my salary would be within range, for what you're looking for. What is it exactly that you're offering? Or you could say, without a better understanding of what the job entails, I am unsure as to everything that would be required in this position. I'd love to talk with you further and learn more about the position, and then we can talk about what my salary requirements would be for that kind of job. You could say, based on my research and experience, I think that I believe that the salary that I'm looking for would be within your range. Lots of different ways to say that. Okay. Now I'm going back and I'm looking at the comments. Heidi, that's a good point. So if you're not the one talking, then maybe then it's okay to take a sip of water. I just I wouldn't want to see somebody taking a sip of water. And I have talked for 8 hours in a day and not really sipped on water. So I don't know if I'm just naturally hydrated. But I also have this issue with, why do we all need to be carrying water bottles with us everywhere we go? We can't go 4 hours without water. Really, I think the human body can go 4 hours without water. Is there any medical research that proves I'm wrong? Hydrate up before you go to the interview, hydrate after. I don't, I mean, do people really have a chronic problem with getting parched while they're talking? I guess sometimes they say that drinking, it can sort of relax the nerves. I get that, but I don't. Yeah, that's yeah, just something to us to think about. And then the other sort of issue. So it's sort of a quality, right? I bet you it's not a deal breaker to take a sip of water, right? Okay, so she took a sip of water. What's the big deal? No big deal. But if I am trying to make the best first impression, would drinking water, even when I'm not talking, would that make the best impression? So it's sort of like putting your resume on copy paper or on resume paper. Like, we know we're supposed to put it on resume paper, but doesn't mean we're not going to get the job if we put it on copy paper. So copy paper is cheaper. Sure, you could take a drink of water, but if you don't take a drink of water, you might look better. So anyway, that's my whole situation here. It's going to be in a continuing saga because I posted it on Twitter and I'm watching the comments come in. The responses are sort of mostly in favor of people being able to take sips of water. So I might lose on this argument. But still, I'm going to hold firm. Don't drink water. Um, oh, Jody, what if the interviewer is drinking water? So the interviewer is not necessarily the greatest example because they oftentimes don't have the best interviewing skills either. Um, but I liked what you said earlier. You could say, hold on a second, do you mind if I take a sip of water? Um, right. So, I mean, if you're coughing, I can clearly see that there would be a need to drink water. But for the most of it, most part, oh, Rhonda, I really hope people aren't doing other things while they're on the phone with you. You really see them going like this and checking their emails? That would make me really annoyed. Now, that can happen. And here's what I will challenge you. I'm friends with a recruiter, and he said, if you don't hold the interviewer's attention, you only have that one chance with them. So if they aren't paying attention, then it ultimately is hurting you. If you find that somebody is looking at their emails or they're totally distracted, they're not paying attention, you might stop the interviewer as a job seeker, as the interviewee, and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. I'm just, well, no, let me start that again. I see that you're checking your emails. Is everything okay? If this isn't a good time for us to interview, we can reschedule if that makes more sense. I just want to be sensitive to everything that's going on in your life." Right? Stop the interview. Find out in a nice way, just call them out on it in a nice way. Because again, if they're not paying attention, you lose. Oh, Rhonda, a recent interviewer had a second screen and was looking at it and said he apologized to me saying he had to check something. I mean, I know we're all supposed to multitask, but we only have a short window of time with somebody, so that makes me sort of sad. You could have said too, then, Rhonda, you could have said, "Oh, if this isn't a good time, I'm happy to reschedule. Would that make it easier for your schedule?" Oh, Suzanne, finishing lunch? So I have this other rule. I have this other rule in business meetings. I was part of a team and we would meet in the morning for a breakfast meeting. It wasn't even a breakfast meeting. It was at 9 o'clock. Was it 9 o'clock? Maybe it was 8:30. An 8:30 meeting. It was an all team. There were about 14 of us in a room. And half the people would come in eating their breakfast. So they'd microwave their cereal or bring in their yogurts and bananas and food, and they'd be eating during the meeting. If you're eating during a meeting, you're not paying attention. You're worried about putting food in your pie hole. So I don't understand eating during meetings, and I don't understand eating during interviews, and that's why I also don't understand eating during or drinking during interviews. So Um, oh, Jody, you know what? We have a lot of, there was a great thread on LinkedIn by Dorothy Dalton about an interviewer who, this is like a new trend. It was during the interview, and the people doing the interview said to the candidate, the person interviewing, "We're going to turn our video off, but we want you to keep your video on. So we can watch you." And so there were all kinds of conversations going on. Well, why is that happening? What is the interviewer trying to prove? And some people are saying, well, maybe the interviewer didn't have good technology, didn't have a good connection, they weren't dressed, they weren't ready, but there are all of these excuses. And in short, one person said, you know what, I would go ahead and oblige the person and keep my video on, but I probably would not be interested in that company afterwards. I would ask them afterwards what was going on with that. Why did I have to keep my camera on if your camera wasn't on? I had other people say, there were other people in that LinkedIn thread that said, I would never do that. If somebody asked me to keep my video on, and they didn't turn on theirs and they weren't going to turn on theirs, I would say, that's it, I'm done. That's not really starting the relationship on a good foot. So, interesting things are happening out there in this new digital world. And I think for all of us, the lesson is how do we roll with it? right? And for you as a job seeker, I know probably nobody wants to do a one-way interview or an interview where you've got the video on and they have it off. It's an uncomfortable situation, but there might be valid reasons, and you don't want to start in an accusatory tone from the very beginning. Go along with it. Then at the end of the interview, after you've done your great job interviewing and they're in love with you, um, ask them what was going on. Help me understand why I couldn't turn my video off and you didn't have yours on. They may have a very valid explanation, but it's not something that you want to start accusing of or asking questions at the very beginning. I think go with the flow and see what happens because again, that could be a test. How well is this person going to handle interesting, unusual changes in scenarios? So that's part of the test here, right? How flexible and adaptable can we be? And how are we going to roll with the punches? Yeah. So that's what I've got for today. Lots of cool stuff happening out there. I hope you all are having the opportunity to do more video interviews. Get those in under your belt. The more practice you get, the more comfortable and confident you will be with technology and the whole experience and looking at the camera, which is very hard to do. It's hard to look at the camera. So, thank you all for being here. I know I wasn't here the last couple of weeks. I had stuff going on, but I'm back here, and I know I've talked about this before. I'm going to try and get a guest to come join me one of these weeks because I think the conversation would be much more enjoyable. So, thank you all. Have a great week. Enjoy your Monday. Thank you for being here with me. Take care.